So I'm rapidly learning. They only have about a 2-day window in which I can engorge myself on either certain types of foods or certain types of content. And 2 days of the Duggar book, Jill Duggar Dillard's book on her family, I need to take a day off. So we're going to be doing Debi Pearl's Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity Part 3. And it's still a hot mess, but it's more less triggering of a hot mess than Jill's book is. I guess Jill's book is so incredibly triggering to me because that was what I came out of. Not quite as bad as Jill, but very similar. Okay, if you know who I am, if you don't know who I am Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I used to write a column called No Longer Quivering for a place called Pathos. It was about the quiverful evangelical movement and evangelicalism in particular. And it was, I was a member of a church like that, 17, 18 years. And I chronicled this for 10 years for Pathos. I've been out a long time now, a long time out. And it's still, I have my days where I'm triggered, even when I try my darndest not to be. It's just what I go through when I live in these spaces and I look at what's going on. And look, I have a cat friend who's getting ready to jump up there. Okay, so these are just my opinions. Don't know anybody I talk about at all. Not Debbie, not nobody. Okay, so I'm doing part 3. We just finished up with the whole marshmallow experiment that Stanford, was that it? That they spearheaded. That Debi completely misunderstands in her big book of bad brains. So the last little bit of the marshmallow chapter was very disturbing because Debi kept using the word grooming. And every time she used the word grooming, I just about jumped out of my skin when reading the book. She says grooming is the thing you need to do with your children. Things like playing with them, doing things the right way, disciplining them. And there are a lot of pointless stories about making a house out of abandoned artificial flowers, dentist visits, and visits with the grandkids that are very, they're not very germane to what we're talking about. So I have to wonder at Debi sometimes when she makes these points that don't seem like they have any kind of point of intersection. So there we are, the end of the chapter on marshmallows. And the next chapter in Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity is called Sacrificing Our Brains to the Screen. And can you imagine what that one's about? It's about the thing that she's already mentioned twice in this book. Brains, not brains, screens. Imagine when I was doing that I was doing a very bad Boris Carlyle horror movie voice. Even though Debi has already sounded off repeatedly about the supposed dangers of screens, television screens, computer screens, tablet screens, and cell phone screens for the win, here we are again in the dumbest place possible. Michael and Debi are consistent in one thing. They hate screens, like cell phone screens. They believe all sorts of evil that a kid would never encounter otherwise proceeds from those screens. All the while moaning about pornography stapled to trees in the woods and other not screen evils assaulting their kids. And this is funny because I just did the thing where I was doing the second part of my review of Jill Duggar Dillard's book, which is Counting the Cost. And she was talking about Josh getting caught with a cell phone, somebody else's cell phone, looking at porn. So maybe Mike has a slight part here. So anyway, here is a quote. Brain researchers assert that the great dumbing down of this generation is primarily due to the digital playground consuming children. What is this, Molech, where we're feeding kids to them? It is what the brain is not doing when held captive by a screen. If, instead of being exposed to games and movies, children were held in isolation for the same period of time, the dumbing down results would be pretty much the same. Okay, Debbie, studies or it did not happen. And all I can say is that anybody that thinks that has probably never played level 3500 on Candy Crush like I have. Ain't no dumbing down going on there. You better have your A game on. You better have your brain firing on all cylinders to beat that kind of level of the brain. And you better be drinking water so your brain's hydrated. Okay, so researchers have concluded that too much unlimited screen time early on can slow development and meeting those developmental milestones we keep talking about, but not the extent that Debi is claiming here. MIT researchers are still studying this, coming to the conclusion, as it was published in Time magazine, both legitimate sources, unlike Debi's things. Quote, the researchers found that over time, children who spent more time using television or computers did indeed show poor performance on the developmental measures. But, and it's a big but, they did not find evidence that the opposite is occurring. It did not seem that children with developmental issues. Oh, what is going on here? The developmental issue. Wait a minute, I'm having some issues here. I'm trying to record and people are PMing me. So where was I? It did not seem that children with developmental issues are more likely to spend time in front of a screen. The links remain strong even after they accounted for other factors that can influence developmental milestones, such as parents' education levels, how physically active the children were, and whether parents read to their children regularly. In layman's terms, the jury is still out on the long-term effects of screen. It's not all bad either. The researcher went on to say this, which pretty much kills Debi's entire argument. Not all screen time is detrimental, she says, and her study did not delve into the quality of the programming the children were watching. The way in which children are using television and computers is also important. Watching with parents or caregivers, for example, can make the experience more engaging and less passive, and can even provide opportunities for learning and social development. Families can develop healthy media habits, she says. When parents watch with their children, they can point out interesting things and contribute to language skills and learning. So, what was Debi's response to all of this stuff? Some crap out of a book that was published well more than 20 years ago and not the latest information. Here's what she had to say. College professors complain of having to dumb down their teaching due to students' inability to think deeply. Newsflash, Miss Debi. I remember my lovely mother-in-law, a college professor, making the same complaint all the way back into 1982. Well before screens took over the entire world. I've heard it before, I've heard it since. It's just not relevant to this discussion at all. I will say I did take a series of Spanish classes at a junior college before moving to Costa Rica, and I was shocked at how lax the standards were. So maybe there's a little truth to that, who knows? Maybe at the junior college level. I don't know. Debi's claims involve the fact that screens are two-dimensional and God created our brains to function in three-dimensional ways. Plus, noises are wrecking the brain, she claims. Really? Literally, this is the crux of her entire argument against screens. She claims that screen noises release brain chemicals that destroy the brain. Okay, her quote. Screened electronics are inflicting serious mental impairment on this generation of children. Again, studies or it didn't happen. Each type of media, whether it be radio, internet, or TV, changes the balance of our individual senses, increasing some at the expenses of others. Again, studies or this did not happen. But that is true of everything that you run across in life. Every person, place, thing we interact with every single day, literally the entire world, quote, changes the balance of everything about us. So this is not even a valid argument. Debi goes on to quote, are you ready for it? You sitting down? A chiropractor. Not that there's not a time and a place for chiropractic. Okay, there is. I have a lot of friends that do chiropractic medicine and swear by it. I don't like being touched since my stroke on the left half of my body, so that makes it problematic for me, so I've never been. There's a place for it, but more when you throw your back out than for advice that should only come from legitimate early childhood development experts, not from just chiropractor. Debi's expert claims that 92% of one-year-olds use screens frequently, which I find very hard to believe, knowing the minuscule attention span of one-year-olds. She bashes all form of television watching for kids, pushing book reading instead, before moving on to a lot of rehashing about how the brain works that she's already covered in previous chapters. Way to go, Debi. Debi warns you that whatever your child sees or experiences from earliest babyhood forms their personality. I would dispute that. Just because after raising 3 kids in almost identical ways and coming out with 3 completely different personalities, I recently read one study that said personality is an executive function of top brain and bottom brain, pretty much hardwired into all of us from a very early age. And I believe that because from the time I was very small, I wanted to create art. My mother would tell me I would do stuff before I could even walk, like grab the Desinex or the diaper rash ointment, and I would take it and paint on the wall. I would draw pictures. I'm still that way. I still want to create. That drive is still in me. That was hardwired from the time I was itty bitty. So moving on to the brain waves, as Debi talks about them. Debi has some very standard brain wave information down that you cannot dispute. But then she spends an inordinate amount of time talking about the creative potential of dreams. How Paul McCartney of the Beatles dreamed the song yesterday before waking up to write it. That's not entirely true. Like much in Debi's book, it's just her misunderstanding shit. Paul did wake up with the melody and the chords, but it took another 18 months or so before it was a complete song. The first placeholder lyrics of that song were scrambled eggs. Scrambled eggs. McCartney did not just wake up with the song, with the completed song. Not at all. And not like she's trying to claim. Okay. I'm going over my notes on this. This book is starting to look like you can blame everybody for everything they're living through, mixed with Debi conveniently forgetting her own personal history. The die has been cast, the Rubicon has been crossed, and there is no turning back now and pretending this is a harmless little book written by a sweet senior citizen lady. This is dangerous garbage. Lies disguised as advice that will get somebody killed if you follow it. The next chapter involved gut health. Debi is all about gut health. Debi takes all the recent new discoveries on how the gut and the brain are linked and does what she always does. She extrapolates them out to places the scientists have yet to go, okay? Right down to making claims about your gut, quote, thinking, unquote. Oh, yeah. Guess what happens when you tell your gut to answer your algebra quiz? Nothing. Your gut is important, but it does not think in the standard way we do thinking. It doesn't know algebra from squat. We're not saying that Debi is 100% wrong here. No, guts and guts health are important. It's just the reason. It's the reason I make sure to take an adequate fiber daily and probiotics. And the right kind of probiotics. The gut is very important because it's where your body gets all the nutrients it needs to keep moving and grooving. And if you get the wrong stuff in, you're not going to have much luck. Debi just figures out a way to use everything gut related against most of the population to tell them that this is why they suck so badly. That's what's funny about Debi's misunderstanding of all of this. There's every kind of over-the-top blaming and shaming in this chapter. When I wrote this chapter, I had just given this guy I know a ride home from town yesterday. The guy is no version of normal. He spent the entire 15-minute car ride babbling about how only organic magnesium works, keto water taken from the bottom of the ocean, and how aliens created junk food. I kid you not, this is what this guy talked about. I know this guy. I know this guy is a burnout from the 1960s. He's fried his brain on too many acid trips. He studied at Berkeley and at MIT. Clearly he was smart once upon a time, but I know him well enough now to know that there's not quite going, the elevator didn't go all the way to the top. Let's put it this way. During COVID, I hadn't seen him for 6 or 7 months. And, hey, Jerry, how you doing? So I'm in the grocery store. How's life treating you since this COVID lockdown? Instead of saying, hey, Suzanne, nice to see you, blah, 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 he said, don't get that COVID vaccination. You'll be dead in 6 months. Well, Jerry, I am more than 2 years past my initial COVID vaccinations and a boatload of the boosters, and I'm still kicking. So obviously that's not a thing. You know, even if your body cannot tell the difference between a magnesium supplement or natural magnesium in the water, Jerry still, with all this crazy, makes better nutritional sense than anything Debi says in this book. She starts out with fat shaming. Let me just say before I say anything that Debi has said or done, fat shaming is always wrong. Always wrong. And that's me talking, who has had problems with my appetite recently because I started swimming for an hour each day. Meaning that if I skip a meal or I'm 15 minutes late, I'll eat the fridge. And this afternoon I did it because I ate 2 hours past what I was supposed to eat because life, and ate the fridge and lay around feeling like one of the 600-pound people in that Dr. Now program, my 600-pound life. God, I felt like that. Even though when I got on the scale, I saw I'd actually lost weight, a pound or so, even though I'd eaten this giant plate of pasta and chicken and vegetables. The science is just not fully established on why some people gain and some people don't. It's not always selfish overeating. Many times there's a genetic predisposition involved, I believe. along with the fact that everybody's metabolism is different medical conditions, and even the factor of what medications you're taking. You hear me talking about inhaling everything and then weighing myself after working out, and I've lost. Trust me, that's not how these things usually go. I gained 20 pounds with COVID like so many other people, and I'm trying to shift that off myself. And because I've had a stroke and I'm not as active in the day to day as I was before the stroke, stroke was over 2 years ago, it's been a little more problematic to start shifting it off. And I learned recently that it takes a good hour in the pool every day to affect my metabolism. So everybody is different. For other people, it might be 15 minutes. Some people don't. I have friends that don't have to worry about that. They eat what they want. And I got to tell you, I don't. I eat whatever I want for lunch. I eat a good breakfast. And, well, let me back that up. I eat a diabetic life stuff. And then when I get to dinner time, I usually have fruit. I usually don't have anything heavy at all. Piece of cheese, that sort of thing. So everybody has what their body needs them to do, and you learn eventually. Since you have no way of knowing how a particular person ended up heavier than normal, it's pretty tacky to judge them just for being that way. Be merciful, because in all actuality, it's really none of your business how fat, skinny, or in between anybody else is. It really isn't. Debi starts with a very charming, not so charming, and likely very false story of one of her grandkids. A miraculous and likely quite fake grandchild who always turns down sugary cereal for a boiled egg and an avocado for breakfast. Debi spends multiple pages yammering on about this miracle grandchild being thin, physically active, and devoid of screens, while obsessing over the bacteria in that child's gut. She's written out a ridiculous scenario where said child talks to the bacteria in her stomach. Yeah, like that happens. I'm eye rolling here. Talking to my gut. Gut bacteria work better. Make me skinny. See how well that works? She claims kids with more gut bacteria are more curious, they're more positive, they're more social, more extroverted, while without as much of a tendency towards fearfulness. So she thinks personality traits are hinged on nutrition, even in the face of overwhelming scientific evidence to the contrary. Debi never met a piece of pseudoscience that she did not fully embrace. First bit of really stupid, dangerous piece of anti-science codswallop in this whole thing. It is not even literally true. One study suggested that hyperobesity might play a role in brain shrinkage. Not established, settled science yet. Okay, here's what a doctor that she quoted, and I believe it is the chiropractor she loves. As your weight goes up, the actual physical size and function of your brain goes down. Dr. Daniel Amen. What kind of name is Amen? Sounds like somebody that is drinking the Kool-Aid at a cult church. It really does. This is all followed by page after page of claims linking the thinking neurons in the guts to the thinking neurons in the brain. Debi goes on to claim if you eat the wrong foods, not only will you be fat, but you'll also wreck your immune system and develop the dreaded brain fog. And here I thought it was my Lyrica doing that crap. Okay, so here's another quote by Debi. It is the result of a malfunctioning digestive system that is unable to supply your brain with the proper fuel. And she put digest instead of digestive. So tell me someone's not having a brain fart there. Yeah, well, Debi, Medical science has also shown you can get the dreaded brain fog if you don't get enough sleep, if your blood sugars in your body are off for whatever reason, if you're sick, if you're taking medications. There's many reasons that we don't even know why your brain fog comes on. There are a lot of ailments that cause foggy brain. Sometimes it's just the stress levels being so high you can't concentrate, or worrying, or anxieties. Sometimes it's medications. It's a long laundry list of things that can slow down your thinking. It's not always eating a Twinkie. Even though somebody did use the defense that they ate Twinkies successfully in a murder trial. Jesus wept. Debi goes on to talk about how many times in the Bible that the word bowels is used, where you might think heart would do better. This is her link as to the Bible establishing that guts can think. Brains, bowels, and hearts all do very different jobs in the body. All are very important, but also diverse. And only one of those three actually thinks. And then we swerve right back to fat shaming. Fat shaming with Debi. And then we end up with a fictional George, more of a junk food junkie than Lori Alexander's husband Ken on his worst potato chip and ice cream binge. Those days that Lori openly despaired over in her books. George eats almost entirely processed foods. He has brain fog. He feels bad. He is way larger than he should be. Debi claims he's killed off a significant portion of his gut bacteria by eating all processed foods. That may or may not be true. There's no evidence of that. Science does show that living on a diet of processed foods isn't good for anybody. It jacks your cancer chances way up. But processed foods eaten in moderation aren't as likely to have an effect on long-term health. Go on and getting that Big Mac every once in a while, or having that once in a blue moon bag of potato chips through ice cream is not going to do anything to your overall health. It's just when you start having a diet of it, it's not real good for you. And we're back with Debi's ridiculous scenarios. Much of the food George eats is now partially indigestible, so it is rotting instead of being digested, which explains why George stinks and has skin rashes. Whoa there, Debi. Do you know what happens when you eat something that your body cannot digest? That's right, it gets expelled quickly during the process of elimination through defecation. I wonder if YouTube will try to ban this video for the word defecation. No worrying about months of rotting food backed up in there, even though I know there are a lot of health food, kale snorting yoga types that try to say that too. Anybody who's promoting a woo-woo type of medical thought seems to think they need colon blow every now and then to feel healthy. But most of us, our digestive tracts take care of undigested foods quite quickly on their own. And if George is stinking, he needs a shower and maybe deodorant. Do you know what the best way to build up bacteria in your gut is? Well, taking probiotics helps a lot. So does doing things like eating not unprocessed foods. And there are certain foods that help. But Debi goes on to talk about the importance of eating fish and taking fish oil supplements. And the story she uses to illustrate the importance compares kids with mental illness, claiming that kids that got fish oil were miraculously cured or prevented from psychosis. Huh? Again, that's literally not how those supplements work, and there's literally not a study that shows what she's trying to say. Not a recent, not a recent one. She doesn't say one word about eating yogurt or taking live active gut culture supplements, which blows my mind because I do know that is a good way. My husband has taken a ton of not antibac, anti antibiotics right now for his prostate infection, and I've been after him to eat some yogurt because that's one thing that is true is if you take antibiotics, it will kill off your good bacteria in your body, and that's the last thing you want. But it's not going to make you psychotic either, like she's trying to claim. Chronic illness shaming. So here we are. And you know I'm hell on that. We get to meet George's long-suffering bride, Sue. Sue eats the right things, but she suffers from an autoimmune illness. Sue thinks George is a lazy slab of bacon, yet does not tell him that, and I'm guessing here, I don't really know from her writing, it's hard to tell, that she's cheesed off at him. She's mad at him. She worries a great deal about the normal things in life, like paying bills and if George will lose his job due to missing work for so many junk food related ailments. Okay, what is a junk food related ailment? Because short of having indigestion, which most of us will do something like have bicarbonate soda in warm water, or take which is basically the same thing, take an Alka-Seltzer. Most of us, that's the maximum that's going to happen for a junk food related illness. Okay, we're back to Debbie's ridiculous story. Sadly, Sue Ann's attitude is slowly but surely destroying her important little microbial helpers. Her constant bitterness is producing chemicals in her stomach and her brain that are responsible for the destruction of her immune system breaking down. Again, not at all how autoimmune illnesses happen or what worrying does to your body, but just a handy-dandy way for Debbie to blame Sue for all of her problems. While we all know that stress can show up in your body in weird ways like elevated blood pressure or aches and pains, saying that it literally kills off your gut microbials is a huge stretch with zero scientific evidence. Debbie just wants to throw crap at everybody. Another insane Debbie quote. Bitterness is more damaging to microbes than bad food. Bitterness is a microbe pesticide. I can't emphasize enough what a complete and utter poisonous, empty-headed ninny-muggins, harmful thinking this is. Bitterness is the evangelical Christianity boogeyman under the bed. Boogeyman. And we are done. I can't take any more of this crap. This is moving slow as molasses, just like me reading the book by Jill Duggar Dillard, because there's just so much to unpack here. Look, this is how much I've covered so far, and this is just my thoughts on this. On this one, I had more thoughts on the Debbie Pearl book because it is poisonous nonsense than I did so far on Jill Duggar Dillard's Counting the Cost. Debbie Pearl's book, Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity, is the biggest pile of poop I've seen in a long time. And that's saying something because I read Doug Wilson's potato salad flinging romance novel, and I read his sex robots novel, and they were pretty bad, but even they had more of a grounding in reality than Debbie's book here has. Okay, you guys, I will be back tomorrow morning with more of Jill Duggar Dillard's Counting the Costs, which is a serious book, and I'm now getting the serious part. I'm getting the part where she's meeting Derek, and even that is weird and Jim Bob filled. If there should be a special place in hell for Jim Bob Duggar, and I usually don't hate people, but I'm beginning to hate him just for all the nonsense that he's pulled on his children through the years. Okay, love you guys. I'll see you Friday morning talking about Jill in this book.